button. Now, I've not set this up at all, so I'm going to go over to the Crestron Home UI and take a look at this. I've just called it Temp Alert at the moment, and it's completely out of the box at the moment.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to go into the settings page, and I am going to access the settings using the advanced user password from the system. Tony had a great idea for a feature, which we are hoping to show the first kind of version of at ISE, where these settings buttons will be able to be shown and hidden from central control system from our web app. But for the moment, they're always shown. But Tony's idea was, you can explain it, Tony, wasn't it? You just wanted to kind of hide it from.
Well, just obviously once we've set the house up, and we no longer need the end users to be seeing our settings or any of the additional features, we can say, right, this is a finished project. Lock off those buttons. When you obviously come back to do your own servicing, you can turn those buttons back on again. But it's just sort of making the end user experience just a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, it's kind of made it onto the roadmap, Tony. I hadn't updated you on that,
Oh,
but
good.
it is definitely in there. So what we want to do, we've already got a checkbox. That's actually how these dynamic buttons come out of the box, isn't it?
Yeah.
We use them set up. So our images are already set up. These icons are going to work just fine for us. What we kind of had on my scope diagram was we kind of had alert disabled and alert enabled. So I'm just going to put those in. Sorry, that's the button name, so it's heating alert. Or
not as important, the button name, but.
So this is the off button. So we're going to make this alert. Oops.
Disabled.
I can't type. Okay. And then we're going to make this one alert enabled. Okay. And that's all we need. Oh, we need to think about some of our settings here.
Fantastic. So obviously having a look, what do we want to do after we reboot? Do we need it to force in a particular on or off, like that it's always enabled?
So I haven't really kind of defined that in scope. I don't think that's important here, but I think probably well understood. We don't want it firing any events. We're actually not going to tie up to the events. We're just going to use the pass-through in this situation. So that one's probably not so important for this situation. We do want to show a button.
Yep.
We don't want to ignore the presses. So the ignore button presses is just used when we're using it just for status.
Just for status, yeah.
And we probably do want it to update the tile. So I think everything's probably pretty good for what we have just now. So I can exit out of this page or just press the back button. And then if I go back to our initial page, I go back to the tile, we've got our alert disabled, and I can click on it, or the user can click on it to enable the alert.
Enable alerts.
Now, what I was mentioning was when I was looking through this, there's another way of doing this. So actually, as I say, the kind of email and pushover drivers predated this pushover
dynamic.
So one thing we could have done as well would have been a little bit of probably what we might have done 12 months ago is we might have created a couple of quick actions, one for alert enabled, one for alert disabled. I think we can all agree that bringing it into this one tool is much, much nicer, even with kind of Crestron's new icons and renaming and what have you. But it would have been possible. We could have called these enable alert, disable alert. And we'd have been able to achieve something pretty similar without the feedback, I guess, would be the one restriction. So the kind of last bit of our diagram, we've set up our button here. We need to tie that event up to the pass-through logic. So we'll do that little section next, and then we'll have a quick look at the alerts. So, yep, that one. So pass-through logic is simply an in and an out to a driver, which is conditional on the state of the button. Have I used all the right nomenclature there? We had.
Yes.
Is that all good? Yeah.
We have an action. We have an action that triggers on the in of the button, and if that button's on, then it comes in through the out as an event, which is brilliant. I think you use better Norman. No, you use some better.
Nice. Yeah, I think we're understood. Okay, so now my temp alert button is here, right? So what we want to do, I'm going to trying to keep these diagrams kind of visible so we can understand the flow. So we're coming out of our wine driver when we have a temperature threshold. And what we want to do is we want to pass through this temp
So this
alert driver.
Yes.
So we go to our pass-through logic, and then we've got a couple of options here. So
this, just to confirm, this is our dynamic UI driver that we put in just before.
This is a dynamic button rather than a UI. So this is a single button one. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So what we want to do on this one, if you can imagine this green line passing through, this is passing through on the on state alert enabled. Our test on off state would pass through on the alert being disabled, and test on both states, which there's a couple of good use cases for as well, passes through anytime this pass through. So you can think of this pass through logic input here being the sequence input, and we'll show you just in a second the event side here. So we want it to only test on state. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's what we need for our use case.
And then we're going to go to the output side of this driver. So we need to find the temp alert driver, and we've got a list of events for this driver. So we've got events that we can do based on the button state, logic, the button being pressed, and then we've got the room tile pressed, driver loaded. So what we want is we want
state on button one, state on logic.
State on logic. And we're going to, so when the event from our wine driver comes in, it's going to pass through, and it's going to pass through the state on logic, and we want it to pass into our email driver. So this is our event. Our pass-through event is the button one state on logic. Maybe my logic diagram needs updated a little bit on that one. And then it's going to pass into our email driver, which I've helpfully not got in the email room. I have it in the lounge room. And what we're going to do is trigger an alert. So what does it mean triggering an alert? What we don't have in the way that we have these alert drivers set up, as I say, they've all got a common interface, and that's based on a set number of alerts. So when we click on the trigger alert sequence action, we have a parameter of which number of alert do we want to trigger. Okay. Now,
and this is the same between pushover, the same between IFTT and the email.
Exactly. So, and you can see in our email driver, we've got 10 configurable alerts. So when I'm choosing which alert to use, if I, for example, set up a number of alerts for this property based on the kind of user requirements, alert 1 might be the alert that I'm going to use for this particular functionality for temperature. And so this alert 1 is what I'm going to trigger. Okay. So that's us done everything we kind of need to do in the custom home setup app. Really, the main thing we need to do now is we need to set up the generic global settings for the email driver, and we also need to set up the specific alert settings for alert 1. Okay. So if I go into the settings menu for this driver, I have, that is a pushover
instead
driver, of not an email one. Bear with me once. So they look so similar.
Well, it's a good thing.
So similar that they are there. Let me 1 second. So pushover email.
You had it in the lounge room.
Yeah, I think it's just misnamed. Second. Okay. So in my email settings here, I've got settings for the emails for each of up to 6 users.
Mm-hmm.
I then have a global settings for my email provider, which is an SMTP email provider. And I've got a little section where I can send a test email and I can check my general things. And this is really the place to start. So you need the test emails get sent out to all users that have a valid email address set up. So I'm going to
this user
set up,
section.
I'm going to set up this email address that I'm going to use just for the testing just now, sisnlight@gmail.com. It's an email address we don't use very much, so I thought it would be a good one to use. Now, worth noting though, this isn't the email address we're using to send our emails. This is just the one that we're using. So this might be our client's email address. It might be the dealer's email address. In terms of supported email providers, the technology we're using is an SMTP account. However, a couple of the big providers, or especially Gmail, have some specific stipulations and kind of changing rules on the way that you can authenticate to an SMTP account. And when we first released this driver, Gmail was entirely compatible. However, they've changed some of their rules since. So what we state in the documentation, we've got a couple of different providers that we advocate using, and we've tested their use. They are just standard SMTP services, but they also have the added advantage that they are free SMTP services. This doesn't mean these are the only ones that our drivers will work with, but we're not going to go and test multiples and many. We have tested Microsoft. However, the Microsoft one, it's not free. So that's why we don't list that as a supported free tested service. So the couple that we list currently on the site are the SMTP to go and Send in Blue is the other service, which both of which offer a free service. They're both reasonably well established, been around a little while, don't think they're going anywhere, and we will continue to kind of monitor their compatibility for the service. So those are the two different free ones we'd recommend, but do feel free to use others. The requirement really is that it's SMTP. So from this one, I can copy my SMTP server, which needs to go in the host name. The SMT port, which is listed, they do list a number of alternative ones. I'm going to use the 2525 port. Username and password. So you can see here. Now, one thing to note here is usernames on SMTP servers have to be email addresses.
So it has to be some sort of...
has to have a syntax of an email address. So even though I know we did have one support case where somebody had set up their username as being just a short username, that will work on SMTP to go, but it won't work for email. They have to be email addresses.
Right, the full.
I'm going to change my password later, but this is just an account used for testing. So then once I've got these 4 pertinent bits of information in, I'm going to update my email credentials. And then we get a little bit of feedback here, and then I'm going to send a test email. Okay. Again, we get some feedback here, so hopefully we should get a test email sent successfully. And if I go to my Gmail, which I thought I'd left open.
Too many windows open now.
Yeah, I know. So if I go to this Gmail account, we shall see we've got this test message. User 1 sent by the Crestron home driver a couple of minutes ago. Okay, so that's stage 1. We want to get that working before we're doing anything else. The next thing we want to do is obviously set up any other user emails, outgoing user emails that we want to use. And then we can exit out of settings. The actual settings, by design, the settings of the content of the message is in the user-facing side, so this can be changed because you might have a user who wants to send a specific message, or they might want to tweak that or change that. So we said we wanted to use alert 1, so I can click into the alert details for alert 1. I can give it a new name. We can make it something specific because we want to use this for the wine temp alert. So that just kind of gives us some reference when we're going back to it later. We know this is the right one. So the wine emergency, we were just talking about Hogmany. The wine is overheating in...
Probably not happening in Scotland right now.
No, I don't think so. So we've got a couple of fields we can pass in an HTTP link in here. We've used that for the pushover and for email notifications to send through a link to a camera feed, for example. And then the most important bit to get across in here, we have to make sure and enable the alerts. For each alert, we have to enable them at 3 different levels. So we can enable a specific user to get this alert. Now we want user 1 to get it because that's the only one we've set up at the moment. We have to enable the alert itself on the alert level, and we also have to make sure that we enable globally notifications. So this is a master switch that turns off all email sending. These enable and disable controls affect the actions as well as the button presses and testing. So these sequence actions that we've just set up in here, we had our logic on trigger alert 1. This alert will not fire if these global alert and user notifications are not set up in the right place. Okay. So I think that's us kind of through everything. Let's go back and just check on our setup page. I think that's us gone through and kind of covered off anything. Have I missed anything in there? I don't think so.
No, I think that's pretty well covered off. So in this particular example, the user is able to turn on and off that alert either on the button that we've just created with the pass-through logic, but they would also want to make sure that the alerts, because often, the reason we're showing this example here is often as a dealer, you might go and set up this email driver, put it in a hidden room so that they can't access any of those settings. So this still gives you the ability to then let the end user turn on and off that function, or any other type of function you can imagine putting on that dynamic button driver, and then having those emails turn on or off depending on that button state.
So we can see the result
of
that's our email coming in there for that second thing. How are we doing for time? I think Tony, quick 5 minutes. We'll have I wanted just to have a quick look through. We do have some other videos online about this, but I just wanted to quickly look through the kind of pushover side of things. Pushover, just to explain the service. Pushover, again, pushover as a business have been around for a good number of years now, well established, and their service works they've got a couple of different kind of service models, but the service that we piggyback onto and we suggest you use is using a model where the service is paid for by the application download onto the mobile device. So there's no cost to the user in terms of setting up a user key. The only cost that you pay is when you download onto the device. If there are multiple devices, then you pay once for each of those devices, and that's how the service is paid for. So setting up a pushover key, which we require as part of our kind of setup routine, is required, but it's nothing that you need to pay for. So you can set one of those up for your customer, or you can set one of those up for yourself as your dealership, or you can set one of those up for your
And the idea
customer's
would
account.
be you need to set up a key for each of those alerts. Is that correct?
No, you need to set up a key per driver in the system.
Driver.
So this pushover driver here, where, as you can see, it's got a very similar kind of feel in terms of the layout and the API. We control it in the same way. We enable and disable alerts in the same way, but rather than emails, we have pushover keys. Okay. So each user has a pushover key, and they get that when they put an app onto their system.
Yep.
For each driver, the kind of global setting is the pushover application key. Okay, and this section down here, where, if you remember, on email we had SMTP details, etc. Minimize that. Here we've got just a single pushover application key. Okay. Now the setup of the application key, or the application, is very straightforward. You just need to create a pushover account. You can visit via the documentation pages on the support section of flightandcontrol.co.uk, and you can clone an application, which is the really quickest way to do it.
Wow. Okay.
And when you do clone that application, you will get a user key, but then also a application key, which will look like this. Okay. So we've got a CH push application, but literally on the pushover site, if you head to the integrations page, you'll see there's a list of applications in here, and one of those is that CH push lighting control.
Gotcha. So you can
when you click on CH push, it'll take you to our website, but there's also a you can literally clone that when you create an application in here, and you will get your own API key token, which is what you are entering into the global settings.
Okay. So you'll add in that API token key first.
So I'm going to take that first as the global setting.
And that's for our API application goes in here. Yep. And then we have particular user keys. Is that right?
That's right. So on my device here, if I head into pushover on my mobile device, I can see right at the top here I have my pushover key. So this is the user key for this application, or for this device.
And I think that was available on the web UI as well, wasn't it?
It is, yeah, and you can tie a single user to multiple mobile devices, so you can have notifications come into you for multiple notifications. So if I go back up a level here, I'll find my user key here, and it shows me a list of my devices. Some other bits, you can also set up your quiet hours you don't wish to get notifications. So it's quite a powerful system in that respect. So if I set up my pushover key here, and if I send my test notification, it's going to pop up on my thing, hopefully. Except I've maybe got them muted. Yeah, there's that one there. So I've got it muted on my device, or notifications disabled on my device.
But this is important to also mention, is that ultimately, with any of these notifications, there are a few steps that you need to make sure. Obviously, it could be the settings on the Crashman home processor. Could be obviously then the user has turned off notifications, which is well within their rights because they don't want to have all these things flooding in. But it's just a matter of making sure you remember to have that conversation with your end users as well.
Absolutely, it's a good point. So then the other quick thing in here is just having a look at the email settings. So there's a little bit more fully featured in terms of here, as I say, we've got the link title and link as we had previously. The links present as a small clickable link in the notification window, which is quite useful, which means you don't even have to open the pushover application. There's also a couple of different priorities and sounds. The pushover system gives a whole list of different sounds, but also what is really useful for kind of critical alerts as a priority.
Yep.
The emergency priority will continue to play on the phone even during quiet hours, and it must be acknowledged before it goes away. So really useful for critical alerts. So I think that's all I wanted to cover. I think we've probably gone over our half an hour, as we always seem to do. As I say, next webinar event we will be live from ISE, Stancia 616. We will be demoing drivers and just available to chat about Credit on Home and about different ideas and projects we have going forward. There from 31st to the 3rd of February. So look forward to seeing you there, either in person or on the next webinar. Well, see you in person, Tony.
Yeah, I'll be there. Looking forward to it. And
Good
obviously,
stuff.
anyone who wants to come along and chat, please do. Let us know if you need to make an appointment.
So we shall see you all on the next one. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Can't even